The skies above the alien colony burned red. Huge fireballs fell like rain, each one a ship or defense platform torn apart in orbit. The once proud cities below shook as shockwaves rolled across the land. Towers of stone and metal cracked, crumbling into dust. The people of the colony, a warrior race known across nearby systems, could only watch in silence as their world began to collapse. For weeks, the enemy had pushed deeper into their defenses. The invaders were ruthless, a species that valued conquest above all else. Their fleets had cut through orbital defenses like knives through paper. Their ground troops, armored and disciplined, poured across the land, seizing territory city by city. The defenders fought hard. They were taller, stronger, and bred for war. But even they could not stop the endless tide. Every time they managed to hold a line, more enemy ships would arrive. Every time they regrouped, another fleet would strike from orbit. It was like trying to fight the ocean itself, wave after wave crashing down until nothing was left standing. In the great council chambers, the surviving leaders gathered. Their proud armor was dented and scorched, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. They had fought for months, but their fleets were shattered, their armies scattered. Reports came in every hour, each worse than the last. Villages wiped out, fortresses destroyed, families fleeing into the wastelands with no hope of shelter. Whispers filled the chamber. Some spoke of surrender, others of fighting until the last breath. But all shared the same thought. They were alone. No allies had come. No reinforcements had arrived. The galaxy had abandoned them. Someone finally voiced what they all feared. No help will come. Not from our neighbors. Not from the great powers. Not even from the humans. The word hung in the air. Humans. The young species from the edge of the spiral arm. Strange, unpredictable, fragile compared to most. Many had laughed at them before, dismissing them as reckless dreamers with little discipline. Surely such a people could not fight against the tide that was now swallowing the colony. And yet, even as the leaders spoke, their minds clung to a desperate hope. Humanity had sent envoys once, promising friendship. But that had been years ago, and no human fleet had ever come this far. It seemed impossible they would come now, with the colony's last cities already burning. Outside, the battle raged on. The capital's shield generators, once thought unbreakable, flickered under the constant assault. Plasma fire hammered the barriers, shaking the ground with every impact. Civilians huddled in bunkers, clutching their children as the walls shook. Soldiers patrolled the streets with grim faces, knowing their lines would soon break. The invaders pressed harder, eager to end the fight. Their war machines rolled across the plains, massive engines of destruction that left deep scars in the earth. Air support screamed overhead, blasting apart defense turrets with merciless precision. On the front lines, defenders fell back step by step. They fought bravely, but their weapons grew hot and empty. Supplies had run out days ago. Many carried scavenged blades or broken rifles. Still they stood, unwilling to abandon their world. But in their hearts they knew the truth. The end was close. As night fell, a heavy silence spread through the city. The enemy paused their attack, waiting for dawn to deliver the final blow. Fires burned across the skyline, filling the air with smoke and ash. The defenders looked up at the dark sky, searching for stars through the haze. None were visible. One soldier, weary and bleeding, whispered to his comrade, "It is over. Tomorrow they will break the shields. Tomorrow we die." The comrade did not answer. There was nothing left to say. Then, in the stillness of the night, a strange sound echoed above the city. At first it was faint, like a distant hum. The soldiers frowned, turning their eyes upward. The sound grew louder, sharper, until it shook the air, and then they saw it. Dozens of bright trails cut through the smoke-filled sky, descending fast. They were not meteors, too controlled, too precise. The trails split apart, streaking toward the battlefield. Some of the defenders gasped in fear, thinking the enemy had unleashed new weapons. Others fell silent, their hearts pounding with a different feeling, something they had not felt in weeks. Hope. The trails grew brighter, engines roaring as they pierced the clouds. Shapes began to emerge, dropships unfamiliar in design, smaller than those of the invaders. The first slammed into the ground with a thunderous crash, doors flying open as figures poured out. The defenders blinked, hardly believing what they saw. The figures were smaller than them, clad in strange armor, carrying weapons that seemed crude by galactic standards. Their movements were fast, coordinated, almost reckless. They were human soldiers, For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the humans opened fire, tearing into the invaders with precision strikes. Explosions lit up the night as enemy lines staggered under the sudden assault. The defenders stared, stunned. These fragile-looking newcomers were charging straight into the enemy's strongest positions without hesitation. The first enemy tank exploded in a burst of fire, taken out by a human team carrying portable launchers. A squad of humans stormed a ruined barricade, fighting like they had nothing to lose. Their shouts echoed across the battlefield, fierce and defiant. The defenders, though battered and broken, felt something stir inside them. For the first time in weeks, the enemy was not advancing. For the first time in weeks, the invaders looked uncertain. And for the first time in weeks, the defenders dared to believe they might not be alone. The tide had not yet turned, but the humans had arrived. The battlefield had been silent for too long, broken only by the rumble of enemy machines and the crackle of fire. Now it roared with new energy. Human soldiers stormed out of their dropships like a flood of iron and fire. Their armor was not elegant like the defenders, nor heavy like the invaders. It was practical, scratched from use, painted in dull colors. Their weapons spat bright fire with every burst, cutting through enemy lines with deadly accuracy. At first, the defenders could not believe what they were seeing. These humans were smaller, weaker by comparison. Their bodies looked fragile, their voices sharp and strange. Yet there was something in the way they moved. Every step was calculated, every shout carried purpose. They did not fight like other species. They fought like survival itself depended on every second. One human squad rushed into a ruined street where enemy troops had taken position. Instead of pulling back, they scattered, diving into cover, moving fast and unpredictable. One fired a launcher, blasting the enemy's barricade into pieces. Another sprinted forward, sliding into the smoke, throwing a grenade into the opening. In seconds, the position was cleared. The defenders watching could only stare, their hearts racing. The invaders were not used to this. They had expected a broken army too tired to resist. Instead, these strange new warriors struck like lightning. Whenever the enemy tried to form a line, humans tore it apart. Whenever heavy armor pushed forward, humans swarmed it, crawling under fire, planting charges in weak points. They did not fight with fear. They fought with a kind of madness, reckless but effective. In the command chamber, the alien leaders watched the battle feed with disbelief. "These are humans?" one of them whispered. Another leaned closer to the screen, eyes wide. "They are fragile, yet they fight like they do not understand defeat." Hope spread through the room like fire catching dry wood. Orders were sent out quickly. Defenders on the ground were told to regroup, to push forward alongside the humans. For the first time in months, reinforcements were moving toward the front lines instead of away from them. On the streets, the defenders began to rise again. Inspired by the humans, they charged, joining the fight. A human squad and an alien squad fought side by side, covering each other's flanks. The defenders provided their size and strength, blocking enemy charges with shields while the humans struck fast and clever, finding weak points others never noticed. Together they became something new, a force the invaders had not prepared for, but the enemy did not retreat easily. Shocked, yes. Slowed, yes. But they were still powerful, still determined to crush the colony. Soon, their commanders responded, pouring more troops into the city. Heavy walkers stomped through the streets, firing massive cannons that tore buildings apart. Swarms of enemy soldiers advanced with burning blades and heavy rifles, screaming their war cries. The defenders braced for another collapse. But the humans were already moving. "Hit the legs," shouted one human officer, his voice cutting through the comms. His soldiers obeyed instantly. While the defenders tried to hold the enemy's attention, the humans crawled between rubble and smoke, planting explosives on the giant walkers' joints. One by one, the massive machines stumbled, then crashed to the ground in explosions that shook the earth. The defenders had fought these walkers for months without success. To see them fall so quickly left them stunned. One alien soldier laughed for the first time in weeks, raising his blade and charging forward with renewed fury. Others followed. The battle had changed. Still, the cost was heavy. Humans fought with endless courage, but they bled easily. Medics dragged the wounded back into cover, sealing wounds with quick foam and dragging them back to the fight minutes later. Many did not return. Yet not a single human broke or surrendered. Every one of them fought until they could not move. On the rooftops, human snipers picked off enemy officers, sowing chaos among their ranks. In the alleys, human engineers turned wrecked machines into traps, rigging explosives from scraps. They fought as if the ruined city itself was their weapon, bending every broken wall and shattered street to their advantage. The defenders had never seen anything like it. To them, war was about strength, armor, and endurance. But these humans showed them something else. War could also be about creativity, about refusing to follow the rules of battle, about using everything, even desperation, as a weapon. By nightfall, the city had not fallen. Smoke still filled the air and enemy fire still rained down. But the shield generators still stood. The humans had bought time, precious time. For the first time in weeks, the defenders were not retreating. They were holding. In a shattered square near the center of the city, human soldiers rested against broken walls. Their armor was scorched, their faces smeared with ash, but their eyes burned with a strange fire. One of them looked up at the alien soldiers who had gathered nearby. He gave a tired grin, lifting his weapon. "Not done yet," he said simply. The alien soldiers, larger and stronger, looked down at this fragile figure, and for the first time they believed those words. The humans were not done, and maybe, just maybe, neither were they. The night was long and restless. Fires burned across the ruined city, sending black smoke into the stars. The defenders tried to rest, but no one truly slept. They knew the enemy would return at dawn. The humans knew it too. In the ruins of an old square, human soldiers sat around their equipment repairing rifles with steady hands, whispering short jokes to keep spirits alive. Their commander, a man with scars across his face, studied the broken skyline in silence. He had seen many battlefields before, but never one so desperate, never one where the air itself smelled of defeat. Yet his eyes burned with calm determination. When the sun finally rose, the enemy came. They attacked with everything they had left. Massive walkers, swarms of infantry, and gunships streaking low across the streets. The invaders were furious. They had expected an easy victory, but now they wanted blood. Their commanders would not allow this tiny resistance to hold. The defenders braced for impact. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blades drawn, rifles humming. But the truth was harsh. They could not last long under such force. Their shields flickered, their ammunition was running dry. The colony's proud warriors, once feared across the sector, felt the heavy weight of despair once again. Then the humans moved. The commander barked sharp orders, and his soldiers sprang into action. They did not form a straight line. They scattered, slipping into alleys, climbing onto rooftops, disappearing into smoke. The enemy expected a conventional defense, but the humans gave them chaos. One group ambushed a gunship, drawing its fire before leaping from the rooftops with magnetic charges. The craft spun out of control, smashing into the streets below. Another squad lured enemy infantry into a trap, collapsing a building onto them with carefully placed explosives. The defenders watched in awe. Humans did not fight like any species they had seen before. They turned ruins into weapons, weakness into strength. Every failure became a chance to strike back. But even with such courage, the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. Their machines pushed forward, their firepower scorching the ground. For every human strike, a dozen more enemies advanced. The defenders' morale wavered again. That was when the human commander made his choice. He gathered his officers in the shadow of a broken tower. His voice was low but firm. "We can't win this by holding the line. We have to break them. We take their fleet, we break their will." The defenders, who overheard, shook their heads. The enemy fleet was huge, too well armed, and the humans had no ships of their own. It was madness. But the humans did not flinch. That night, under the cover of smoke, the plan began. The defenders created distractions across the city, launching sudden raids to keep the invaders focused on the ground. Meanwhile, small human teams slipped away toward the spaceport. The spaceport was a graveyard of ships, burned hulks, shattered transports, broken fighters. The humans moved quickly, scavenging fuel cells, explosives, and working engines. They were not here to escape. They were here to build weapons. Hours later, as the enemy prepared their final assault, alarms blared across their fleet. Human-controlled shuttles, patched together from wreckage, launched straight into orbit. They were barely functional, shields flickering, hulls groaning. To the invaders, they looked like suicide runs, and in a way they were. The first shuttle rammed into an enemy cruiser, detonating its fuel cells in a blinding explosion. The second slammed into a carrier, tearing open its hangar and setting fire to dozens of fighters inside. Chaos spread through the fleet. From the ground, the defenders looked up in shock as fire bloomed in the sky. The humans had turned broken ships into bombs, using desperation as their weapon, but it was not enough to destroy the fleet. Not yet. The human commander led the final push himself. He boarded a half-ruined freighter with his squad, loaded it with explosives, and launched it directly toward the enemy flagship. Enemy guns shredded the hull, but the freighter kept moving. The humans inside fought their way to the bridge, forcing control of the ship. With alarms, screaming, and fire bursting through the corridors, they aimed it at the heart of the flagship. The explosion lit the sky like a second sun. The enemy flagship broke apart, its pieces falling like burning stars into the atmosphere. Across the battlefield, the invaders faltered. Their chain of command shattered. Their fleets began to scatter. On the ground, the defenders erupted with renewed fury. Seeing the impossible achieved, they roared as one, charging forward. The humans were bleeding, many gone, but their sacrifice had ignited something deep in the defenders' hearts. They fought with a strength they thought they had lost forever. Enemy lines crumbled. Walkers were swarmed and toppled. Infantry scattered under the combined might of human and alien fighters. The city, once doomed, became a fortress of fire and resistance. Through the smoke, the defenders saw the human commander emerge from the wreckage of a crash. His armor was shattered, his face burned, but he still stood. He raised his weapon high, and the defenders cheered with voices that shook the heavens. The battle had changed. The tide was no longer against them. For the first time, the invaders were retreating. As night fell, silence returned to the city. But it was a different silence now. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence after a storm. The defenders looked around at their ruined home, at their fallen comrades, and at the humans who still stood among them. Exhausted, bleeding, and half-broken, the humans smiled. They had done what no one thought possible. They had taken despair and turned it into fire. The defenders finally understood. Humans were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most advanced. But when all hope was gone, humans found a way to fight, and they never stopped until the tide had turned. The city lay in ruins. Smoke curled up from shattered towers, and the ground was covered with scars of fire and steel. Yet for the first time in months, the defenders stood in silence, not because of defeat, but because the battle was won. The enemy had fled. Their fleets were broken, their ground troops scattered, their command destroyed. The defenders could hardly believe it. They walked among the wreckage in disbelief, touching the ground as if to make sure it was real. For so long they had lived with despair pressing down on their hearts. Now suddenly the sky felt wider, the air felt lighter. Victory, once impossible, had been given back to them, and at the center of it all were the humans. They stood in small groups across the city, their armor cracked and their bodies wounded. They were exhausted, too tired to celebrate, but their eyes still burned with determination. Many were helping the wounded, both human and alien alike. Others worked on clearing debris, refusing to rest even after such a brutal fight. The defenders looked at them with awe. These strange, fragile creatures had landed when all seemed lost, and they had done the impossible. They had turned fear into fire, despair into defiance. They had carried everyone with them into the storm and come out alive. The alien leaders gathered again in the council chamber, though it was barely standing. The roof had collapsed in places, and the walls bore scorch marks from the battle, yet their voices were no longer heavy with despair. They were filled with something new, respect. "They came for us," one leader said quietly, "when no one else did. When we had nothing left, the humans came." Another leader nodded, his eyes on the broken skyline. "They are not the strongest. They are not the most advanced. Yet I have never seen courage like theirs. I have never seen a will so fierce," the council agreed. This was more than just a battle won. This was the birth of something greater. On the streets, defenders and humans worked side by side. Where once they had seen each other as strangers, now they fought and bled as brothers. The bond forged in fire could not be broken. Soldiers traded stories in broken languages, pointing at scars and laughing together. Children, once hiding in fear, peeked from the rubble to watch the strange new warriors, their eyes wide with admiration. But the war was not finished. The enemy was wounded, not destroyed. Everyone knew they would return, seeking revenge. The colony still stood, but its armies were weak, its fleets gone. Alone, it would fall again. But with humans, maybe it would not. The human commander, his armor shattered and his face scarred, stood before the alien leaders. His words were simple, direct. "We fight together or we fall alone." The message was clear. Humanity had no intention of leaving the defenders to their fate. They were not here only for one battle. They were here to stand beside them until the enemy was gone for good. The defenders felt something stir deep inside them. They had thought their time was over, that history would erase them. But now, with humanity at their side, the story was not finished. In the following days, the city became alive with rebuilding. Human engineers shared their knowledge, repairing broken systems with creative solutions the defenders had never considered. Human medics worked tirelessly, teaching new methods to heal wounds that the defenders once thought fatal. Everywhere they went, the humans showed not just strength but ingenuity. They turned scraps into tools, ruins into defenses, despair into hope. The defenders began to see what made humanity different. Other species might have abandoned them. Others might have waited for rewards or alliances before sending help. But humans had come when there was nothing left to gain, when all hope was gone. That was their legacy, the refusal to let others fall alone. Soon, word spread across the galaxy. Rumors reached distant systems of how the humans had turned the tide on a doomed colony. Some laughed, dismissing it as exaggeration, but others listened carefully. For centuries, humanity had been underestimated, seen as reckless and naive. Now, those whispers carried a new tone, fear and respect. The enemy, once unstoppable, now hesitated. They had seen what humans could do. They had watched as fragile soldiers, armed with crude weapons, had torn apart fleets and armies with sheer determination. They had learned the truth the hard way. Humans were not to be ignored. On the colony, the defenders prepared for the next stage of the war. But this time they did not feel alone. Human soldiers marched beside them, training them in new tactics, showing them how to fight in ways they had never imagined. The defenders, once proud but broken, rose again, stronger than before. The bond deepened. Where there had once been doubt, now there was trust. Where there had once been silence, now there was laughter. Humanity had not only saved a colony, they had created an alliance born in blood and fire. One night, as the city finally grew quiet, an alien commander stood on the walls overlooking the stars. He remembered the day the shields had almost fallen, the day surrender had seemed the only choice. He remembered the hopeless silence, the fear that had consumed them. And then he remembered the roar of human dropships tearing through the sky, the moment hope returned. A human soldier joined him on the wall, sitting down with a tired smile. They did not share a language fully, but they shared something deeper. They shared survival. The alien commander looked to the sky and whispered to himself, "When hope is gone, send for the humans. They will bring it back. The war would continue, yes. Battles would still be fought. Lives would still be lost. But from that day forward, no one would forget what happened on the burning colony. No one would forget the day fragile, reckless humans turned the tide of history. The legacy of humanity was not in their strength or their weapons. It was in their spirit, in their refusal to bow, in their ability to turn despair into victory. And that legacy would echo across the stars.